Welcome to Nightreign Podcast. This episode is for those striving to descend to the deepest depths. Whether or not that's your goal, the strategy we talk about today will strengthen your nightfaring. First, some introductions. I'm Evan with Grand. How did you get to max rank, Grand? Solo, with a team?
So I got to max rank playing solo queue trios. So I would play with random teammates each time. I think I played a few times when Deep in Night first came out with friends, but the majority of especially Depth 3, 4, and 5, I was playing with random. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is the strategies for playing with random teammates.
Yeah, for those who aren't aware, let me break some things down for you. Depths 1 to 3 are comparatively fun in games, whereas rank 4 is where flames of ambition are snuffed out. And you might imagine rank 5 as the promised lands where great players romp around in eternal celebration. And to some extent, that's true. When I did reach rank 5, it was exciting to work together like a pro sports team with just some really fluid plays. However, there's a lot of pairing up and pairing down which goes on, which muddles the mixture, so to speak. If you're in depth 5, then you can be paired down into depth 4, and the people in depth 4 are often unprepared for the challenge of depth 4. And not only are they unprepared, but per the new rules, they will be staying in depth 4 for at least 3 games before they're knocked out of it. They're sometimes so ill-equipped to the challenge that it will feel like they're trying to sabotage your mission. And if you lose in depth 4, you'll lose, 600 points or something. It's 550 points if you're in depth 5. So you can lose a huge amount of points, and it can feel very difficult if everyone's not pulling your weight. Or if you're in depth 5, a depth 4 player can be paired up into your depth 5 game. So someone who just entered depth 4, again, is not really up to the challenge. They were just kind of having a fun time in depth 3. And depth 4 and 5 requires more perfect play, very cohesive strategy and technical play. And so this depth 4 player can be paired up into your depth 5 game. And again, it can feel like your game is being sabotaged. So it's not really the paradise that I was hoping for. And the fact that you were able to do it with the randoms is especially impressive because in order to progress in depth 4 and depth 5, you have to basically win 100% of your games because you lose so many points every loss. And the fact you're able to carry randoms is incredibly impressive. Certainly not something I was able to do. And when I was progressing to max rank, I needed to get a very specific set of teammates who I knew weren't going to just fall flat on their faces. I will say, though, my descent to max rank was definitely the least fun I've had in this game because I felt like I had to not play unless I had that exact precise team. Otherwise, I felt like my game would be sabotaged. So I ended up having to play less and fear to play. And it also motivates a lot of, I would say, bad or cowardly behaviors. Like if you get paired down into depth 4, are you immediately quitting that game? Are you ducking out that way? Or if there's a Night Lord you're very unconfident in, are you ducking out that way? So there's a lot of bad behaviors that go on. And as we covered in the Mental Strength podcast, setting yourself a goal which is not entirely in your control, setting yourself up for frustration. Your goal could be to improve and just have fun. And those are achievable goals. And certainly what we're going to be covering today will help that as well.
In my experience, when I reached 9999 or max rank, pretty much every single teammate I got was very good. But once you start to fall down into like a lower depth 5, that's where my teammates were kind of hit or miss. Sometimes they'd be pretty good, sometimes they'd be pretty bad. And also to correct one thing, or to set the record straight, yes, I have carried people in depth 5. I actually just had a game the other day where I carried a couple of guys against the Balancers as executor, which was super fun. I'm actually going to post that one soon. But I've definitely been carried as well, so I'm not some god at the game, but I am pretty good. I think I just want to share some of my strategies here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, be the teammate that you would want on your team. In other words, practice empathy. Have empathy for your teammates. Think about what they would want during the game. And one way you can do that, as soon as the game starts, every single time I'm opening up the menu and I'm checking to see which relics they have. Because you might see a Duchess, but she might not be running magic attack power. Maybe she's running skills. Maybe she's doing vigor and endurance stat changing relics. Maybe your Wilder, maybe you got me on your team and I'm playing my spellcaster Wilder build and I'm looking for staves or seals. If you immediately assume just because they're playing the Wilder that they want great swords and candlesticks, you might be wrong. I've had lots of games where I went into a game against Caligo or Sentient Pests and I'm looking for Flame Fall Upon them the whole time. So just be sure that you're looking at that right away so that as soon as you start the match, you know what they're looking for. As you're routing, ping locations that they would want to go to, even if you don't need to go there. Like if I'm the Wilder, I don't think I really need a purple stone because, well, if I'm playing normal Wilder, I should say. I might not need a purple stone because I can just pick up whatever random purple weapon that I like and run with that. But if I have a Revenant on my team, and now especially so because she can start with a bunch of different spells, she might want a purple stone. So let's go run through there and grab that, even if you don't need it. And then to kind of go along with that, hit the rises, hit the forts and the great churches for your spellcasters. And make sure you're doing that because they're very important. They're going to be doing a lot of your damage if none of you guys are running the, at least if you're not running the new skill-based builds. And then check their loadout a few times throughout the match and see how they're doing. Make sure they have good stuff. If they don't have very good stuff, maybe when you're picking your rewards, you can maybe drop something for them that they might like if you have it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just look for weapons they might want, passives they might want. Try to make sure everyone has those important items for the run, like damage negation, or if you're playing against Libra, you want to make sure everyone has less likely to be targeted, or at least 2 people out of the team have it. A couple examples of this from my recent games is I had a game against the Balancers and I saw Saint Trina's sword and we had an Executor on our team. So I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to drop this for him, even though I might want to run this or I might want one of the other passes, but this is going to be really good if I give that to the Executor. And it was, because he slept like every enemy the whole fight.
Yeah, was he able to sleep the queen or the lead Valkyrie?
I don't remember. I don't think so. Just kill him with a riposte after you put him to sleep. We had a game versus Everdark Libra. Well, we didn't know it was Everdark at the time. But I had a teammate who was a Duchess, and she was playing the skills build. I found less likely to be targeted, so did our Raider. But I dropped mine for the Duchess, and I also dropped her Halo Scythe later on because I know she has more FP than I do, and she has less health, so she's maybe not the best at taking aggro, even though her dodge is really good. I'm really good at taking aggro because I got the Sun Catcher. I have a little more HP, a little more damage negation. What was the result of that? We shredded Everdark Libra in like 2 minutes. So it was a great decision on my part. Maybe I would have wanted those passives because Less Likely is really good in that fight. The Halo Scythe is really good on the Executor, but it was the best play to make for the team, and it worked out very well.
Do you have any advice for finding less likely to be targeted on the Libra runs?
How I usually do it is anytime I see a chest I can open, or maybe I'll do a little bit more exploring in like the camps. I kill a lot of red enemies. That's something I do in general. Even if you see a red monkey, go kill it, because they might drop damage negation at full HP. They might drop successive attacks, negate damage. They might drop less likely to be targeted. So you just have to take a little bit more time to explore on that expedition in particular until you find it. Because I even had one run where at the very end, running into the final circle, I opened a chest and I found a white weapon with less likely to be targeted on it.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. As I said, if I've played casters without less likely against Everdark Libra, and I felt like I could never resolve a spell. Like, people would always hit me, but if you have it, then you definitely have some gain going. Also, check the merchants there, the super merchant and the basic merchant. They will sometimes sell it too.
I don't know that I've ever seen it on the basic merchant, but I have seen it on the super merchant many times, and that's a great thing that you brought up, because I actually just had a game the other day where we had a super merchant versus Libra. And of course, he was selling less likely to be targeted, and I bought it instantly, and I even pinged it in front of the shop for my team, but they didn't buy it. So what happened? We died in the final boss fight because they couldn't stay alive, and I was playing Scholar, which is like the worst character to carry with. So it was not so good. You need to be watching out for that. You need to check the super merchant in particular and try to find that. Otherwise, Everdark Libra is almost impossible. I think I beat him once without less likely to be targeted, and that was in depth 4. Yeah, just make sure everyone has stuff that they need. Looking for X attack power is good. If you have a spellcaster, if they don't have a whole lot of magic attack power, give that to them. If you got a Wilder with a candlestick, look for fire attack power for him.
Yeah, the two-handing bonus works well for the skill builds again.
Oh, yeah. Another way to be a very good teammate is to stick together 95% of the time, if not 100% of the time. Even if you think what your teammates are doing is a bad idea, just go with it. Feel free to suggest a different play. So some okay times to do this, though, is if you're really high level and you want to run through a tunnel real quick, you're level 11, 12, you need a purple stone, you can kill the enemy very quickly, go ahead, do that. If you want to go grab a specific item like a seal, a staff, or a stone sword key, that's probably fine. If you have the Caligo or Libra invasions, you actually should have one player go do that because you don't need all 3 players to go do that. If your teammates are being greedy and fighting in the storm, you can probably run away if that's happening and you don't feel safe. Or if you're playing Scholar, then you're probably going to be splitting off, going to the shops and buying pots and what have you, if that's what you're doing with the Scholar.
Yeah, different characters will have different abilities to sustain in the storm. Certainly the low hit point characters less tolerant to it, or if you have any items which make you more vulnerable to it, then you of course will have to duck out faster. As far as the Scholar, I have played with a Scholar today who ducked out to buy some more fire pots at a nearby merchant and re-entered the fight. I can see that. I think that's good, but you shouldn't be falling behind as a Scholar. You as teammates should be helping the Scholar out by opening boxes, finding stuff for the Scholar, and the Scholar needs to prioritize the items so they're not constantly behind.
Just because you're playing Scholar isn't an excuse to never be with your team. If you have a Scholar on your team, try to help him out, grab fire pots, stuff that he can eat. You should be focusing your relics when you're doing your builds on damage and not so much on things like survivability, because you can find survivability along the way. I have seen some people, I remember an Iron Eye in particular the other day who had just a ton of vigor stacked on his relics and really no damage. Now, Iron Eye isn't a very high damaging character as it is, so I can kind of understand that. But I would say look for things like, the Balancer relics, glass necklace, affinity damage, physical damage. If you can fit the Night Invader in there, that's still very good, but you should try to slot it with something else, usually like for example, on I think it's my Duchess, I have it with a character skill attack power, so I'll throw that on there. That's very good. Everjail is pretty dead with the DLC, but if they have it alongside something else good and there's not a whole lot of opportunity cost, I would say go for it. To kind of touch on post-damage restoration is good, especially on characters like the Guardian, but I feel like it kind of drops off pretty heavily in depths 4 and 5 because you're taking so much damage that if you take a big hit and your next hit is the next hit is going to kill you, you probably want to try and run away and heal rather than try to recover some of that health back. Now, again, if you have it with something useful, I think it's good. I do still run it on a lot of characters, but I think it's not something that I particularly focus on.
I found that too, in the sense that if I'm playing someone who cannot take another hit, which is almost everyone, you want to back off and heal. However, sometimes, for instance, when I use a skill build or even sometimes casters, I'll be hit mid-skill animation, but then my skills continue to do damage, like Vike's War Spear. I had 2 damage negation at max hit points. Libra hit me in the middle of my Vike's War Spirit animation, and I immediately regained all the hit points to the flames on the ground. So there definitely is a place for it, but
Definitely.
You just can't be as reckless. Like Undertaker cannot continue to tank and hope that the post damage recovery is just going to keep her at max hit points. You have to be more cautious with it.
One caveat with the vigor or maximum HP relics, I would say if you can fit them in, they are good. Obviously, more HP is better, and especially on characters like the Guardian, where that I believe it's a percentage, right? With the increased maximum HP on the deep relics.
Deep relics is a percentage.
If you give that to someone like the Guardian or the Wilder, that's going to do a lot. That might be worth it. But you really shouldn't try to focus on that. It should be more focused on damage, because the faster you kill the boss, the less chance you have of dying. And then something that I mentioned in the last podcast is I think less about what happens when the boss hits me, and I think more about what happens when I hit the boss. You shouldn't really be planning to get hit. The whole point of the game is to not get hit. You still are going to get hit sometimes, but your relic should focus on doing as much damage as possible when you do make those hits. And then on top of that, once you find some damage negation passives, especially on higher hit point characters like the Wilder, your Vigor relics don't really do a ton for you other than maybe give you a little bit more flask restoration. Try to focus on damage, less on survivability, especially in later depths, because most characters are not surviving one hit.
Kind of want to look at your role. If your role is more to do stance breaks and delay and give openings for your damage dealing party members to deal a lot of damage, maybe you do want to have more vigor. If your point, though, of your character is to maximize your damage, my question for you, Grand, is how do you do that as, say, a raider or a tank class? It is pretty rewarding to maximize your spell school class, like add Crystalline Sorcery, and casters can even get Crystalline Sorcery on top of magic attack plus up. You can have relics, deep relics with both of those. Base relics, you want to have the Night Invaders. You can have the Crystalline Sorceries on the same relic. So it's really easy to stack, and there's definitely a path forward to stack a ton of elemental damage, affinity damage. But I'm less clear on how best to do that with melee damage, or if that's worthwhile. So can you talk about your experience in that category specifically?
Nowadays, with the Balancer relics, our melee characters are doing a ton of damage. You know, the Wilder with the Candlestick, Raider with the Candlestick, Executor with the Halo Scythe. I mean, I think it's definitely important to focus on those. And even before the DLC came out, I was doing things like Wilder with fire attack power up, right? And then maybe Dormant Power discovers Great Hammers, or maybe I'm using his Fiery Follow-Ups ability and I find a purple greatsword and use that. That can still be very, very effective.
If you are gunning for Halo Scythe, then the deep relics you would want are the ones which increase your holy damage +4, essentially. Relics which increase the damage of a specific weapon type, such as Reapers, would not be effective in this case, as it doesn't increase the projectile damage of the weapon skill. However, it does increase the damage if you're physically hitting an enemy with the weapon, such as the Colossal Sword moves like Lion's Claw. It would increase that skill damage, and that's by 10%. I will say, though, often when I got Great Hammer attack power up, I would often be stuck with not using a Great Hammer. I would end up using some sort of other fire-based weapon. If you have your fire attack +4 up on these skill-based characters like Wilder, that's not going to be affecting all your attacks. For instance, if you have split scaling and you're just hitting people with your weapon, even if it's a fire weapon, half of that damage will be physical and half will be fire. If you're using the Ash War of the Candlestand, then that is all fire, and that is going to be extra effective. You could alternatively have, for instance, if your target is poisoned, then your attack power increases. That will affect both your physical damage and your affinity damage. If you're playing with an Iron Eye, that's a pretty reasonable thing to do, and the Night Lord isn't immune to poison, for instance. I think that's less true of Frostbite or Rot. I wouldn't bother with that. I have a build which I just got with Fists, which I have greases. So whenever you use a grease, you increase your attack power. It's just physical though. So if you have a split scaling weapon that's not very effective, I think I'd still be better off with +4 physical damage, but then that's still halved if I have a split scaling weapon. Given that there's a lot of halving going on and you're definitely less guaranteed to get the affinity, you're less guaranteed that your attack up, especially on the depth relics, is going to affect your physical damage or your affinity damage, and you're running into, I think, diminishing returns. Like if you have attack power up +4, that's 12% physical damage. But again, if your goal is to get an affinity weapon, then that's going to be halved to 6%, and then maybe decrease a little bit more, counting on the curse on that item. So given that there's some downsides there, and I think it's a little bit less clear, I would not be opposed to increasing my survivability on these melee type classes. Now, again, that is different though. If your goal is to do these weapon skills up, then you probably do want to look for the affinity bonus, which is the holy and such. And as Grand says, if you can get some survivability on that as well, that'd be excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Executor class with the Halo Scythe. The double balancer relics are doing so much damage that I'm like, okay, I can probably afford to put a max HP on him, which I did. I think I have one that does max HP and then also max HP for each Great Church. And then I think I have a couple holy attack powers. And
one reason why adding damage to your relics could be the best choice is because it's multiplicative with itself, meaning the more you have, the better it is. So if you have 5 instances of plus 12% damage on your relics, that adds, well, it doesn't add, it multiplies up to 76% total damage. And if you add a 6th instance of that bonus, because 97% total bonus damage, a 21% benefit rather than the 12% you may have imagined it to be. Now, if you add a 7th instance of plus 12%, that such as you can do because you can have magic +4 up on a shattering crystal alongside a shattering crystal on your one relic. If you have a 7th instance, that adds up to 121% total damage bonus, meaning your last 12% instance actually gave you 24% benefit. However, if what you're trying to do is increase your physical damage, but instead you run up against split scaling where you only get half that much benefit, then it's a lot worse. 6 instances at only half benefit, 6%, is only a 41% total benefit. So it's much, much less than the 6 instances of the full affinity damage plus 12 up, which is 97%. Now, a physical attack up on base relics provides even less damage, so instead you'd be looking for successive attacks, Night Invaders, or Everjail, depending on your level. But I would not go out of my way for just the physical attack up on the base relics, and to be honest, maybe not on the depth relics either. Instead, I would consider going in a different direction, given the uncertainties of physical attack up and inconsistencies of other way to increase your non-affinity damage. I would strongly consider instead pushing harder into another direction, such as increasing your survivability with health up. If your character naturally has high base hit points, then the percentage-based hit point increase on depth relics can be attractive. If you have 3 instances up of those on your depth relics, that's a multiplicative benefit of 33% more hit point total. And that combines well with any passive weapon bonuses that you find in the game, which increase your survivability further. With one uncommon weapon passive bonus of damage negation at max HP, it's like your relics gave you 43% more hit points. And with 2 passives, including a rare, it's like your relics gave you a 61% more hit points. So you can significantly increase your survivability, and that may be the better way to go with melee characters who are not necessarily going for a specific affinity type. Now, if you're a caster, the percentage-based increase to your health is not the way to go because you have low natural hit points. Instead, you want the special base relics, which increase your hit points by a set amount, which is 100. And so this is like Dark Knight of the Fathom or Knight of the Fathom. At level 12, adding 100 hit points to the Duchess would be a 12.8% increase. At level 3, you get the 100 hit points, and it's a 26% increase. For Recluse, it's 15% at level 12, even more, and 31% at level 3. And it's most tempting for the Recluse because she increases her hit points with her relic, which increases her max hit points after an ultimate. So using that in combination with this Knight of the Fathom, it's a 22% at level 12 and 47% at level 3 if you also added the Knight of the Fathom. So that 47% at level 3 is certainly more than you could get for spells. The 22% is also approaching the percentage bonuses you could get from adding another damage up plus 12%. So the 22% more hit points, again, is close to what you could get from spell damage, even multiplicatively. So it is tempting to have one Knight of the Fathom on your Recluse. On other casters, I don't think the percentage points are quite there. And a lot of this depends on what you have, because say you don't have that Holy Attack power up, you'll be happy. Well, you'll definitely settle for survivability instead. And if ultimately you do need to stay alive, if you die, you go down, your team's damage really drops by 60% probably because you're not dealing damage, and one of your teammates has to spend some time to get you back up. So they're not dealing the damage either. You do need to survive, and a lot of that has to do with not taking hits. But that said, taking hits it's going to happen for a lot of players. It's
happens to me.
There's a lot of, we can't really recommend to people just don't get hit. That's that coming back to Elden Ring, that's pretty bad advice. But you do need to both have a reasonable understanding of the boss moveset, so you at least have a good chance of not getting hit. And then sometimes you will get hit, and you do want to survive. And a big part of that is with these damage negation weapon passives, which you'll find in game. Grand, why don't you talk more about those?
Before we move on to that, the best advice I ever heard was get the boss's health to 0 before you die. Yes, let's talk about some of these damage negation passives. I know you guys did an episode on damage negation passives, so we won't go super duper in depth, but the ones you're really looking for are damage negation at full HP, successive attacks negate damage. Damage negation on charge attacks also works really well for a lot of characters. And then taking damage, boost damage negation is really good with the Guardian, or if you have other damage negation passives alongside it. And then casting spells is okay. I'm kind of meh on it because unless I'm running Carry and Slicer, because then I'm up in the boss's face pretty much always casting a spell. So that can be pretty good. But you should be, when you're playing a spellcaster build, you should be looking for safe openings to cast spells and not just doing it whenever you feel like it.
Well, that's very true. You're looking for openings rather than just spamming spells.
So some of the curses in Deep of Night you should avoid, and this is just specifically on weapon passives. Some of these we should avoid on relics as well. You want to avoid repeated evasions, lower damage negation on relics for sure, and on weapon passives as well. You also want to avoid more damage taken after evasion in case you get roll caught. X buildup like poison or rot below max HP. You want to avoid on relics, at least in my experience. I know some people would disagree with that, and some people do run it. My only thing is, if I need to clutch up and the boss has like a quarter of his health bar and I only have 1 flask or 0 flasks left, and now I'm getting poison buildup and I can't just get rid of it, that can be a run ender right there. So I'm not really big on the poison buildup below max HP on the relics, but on weapons it's totally fine because you can just drop it if you run out of flasks. All resistances down, you definitely want to avoid on relics because it reduces your resistances by 80, which is a lot. On weapon passives, it's not so bad. It's only like 30 or 40, I think. There's different tiers. I think the lower one is 30 and the higher one is like 40 or 45. That's not too bad, but if you're running into a boss like Libra or Caligo, it's not really that great. So you could probably use it just temporarily and then drop it before the boss fight. Captain Obvious here, continuous HP loss. You definitely don't want that on weapons or your relics. But I can't say I've never picked up a Halo Scythe with continuous HP loss on it when I was level 3, hoping to find a continuous HP recovery to go with it.
Or something better, yeah. The one thing to restate is that if you're fighting Caligo especially, and to some extent Augur and Sentient Pest, they all have howls which do repeat damage. So if you have any relic effects which say you get madness on taking damage, those can be no-go against those bosses, especially Caligo, she will just do continuous little frostbite damages to you and you'll just go mad or get death blighted to death. In those situations, I would definitely preference you gain rot or poison below 85%. There are definitely situations where that will kill you, but against those bosses, Caligo, especially Sentient Pest, Augur, who does howl, base Augur at least does howls, then you don't want any taking damage causes a status buildup. Even if you take poison, that can keep you off max hit points and pretty bad. And I'll add to that list balancers. If you fight Moog, I think it's almost impossible to win if you have some sort of thing like madness on taking damage because he sprays blood flame everywhere. So be aware. Again, you will be telling these relic builds for these specific Night Lords. So that's something you should keep in mind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you're getting hit by status effects a lot with your builds, just switch them out and put something else in there so that you don't take a status effect. Me personally, versus all those bosses, I usually feel like I'm technically strong enough to not get hit multiple times and proc a status effect. So if you're feeling confident, go for it. But if you're not feeling confident and you're getting proc status effects a lot, definitely get rid of those. I would agree with that. If you have any relic curses that decrease your stats, those ones actually really aren't that bad. They only decrease your damage. Like, for example, if you decrease faith, I think you're only losing like 5% spell damage, which is not really all that bad.
Maybe at start, but at level 12 and such, it's more like 1 to 2%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not so bad. Yeah.
The only one I would say don't run maybe is reduced vigor and arcane. Even though I said vigor is not important, I also don't think it's good to reduce your vigor. Now that we talked about the curses to avoid, I actually just want to throw a quick caveat in there for weapon passive curses. If it's early in the game or if it's late in the game and I found 0 damage negation and now I'm involuntarily doing a no-hit run, I actually won't care if I pick up an evasion curse, like repeated evasions or more damage taken after evasion, because I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well run this sweet weapon with this horrible curse because it doesn't really matter. Don't just automatically turn it down if you see repeated evasions or more damage negation after evasion. I've definitely picked them up before, especially early in the game, and then I can just drop it later. Or if you have a ton of damage negation, like you have 2 damage negation at full HPs and successive attacks, then who cares? Just run the weapon. You're going to take a little bit more damage, but you're not going to die. One last thing with the curses. This has happened to me. Well, actually, no, this has never happened to me. It's happened to a friend of mine.
Yes.
Try to remember, if you pick up Knight's Tide damage, it's very easy to forget, or so I've heard, that you have it, because you can, especially if you pick up 2 of them and then you start fighting a boss in the storm as the storm's closing. That can be very bad. So just try to make a mental note if you pick up Knight's Tide damage, because that can be a killer if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, it's good to check. Whether or not you think you have it, if the Knight is approaching, just check, just to see, because, yeah, that can make a big difference. And it's something it is easy to forget because it doesn't enter into your play for the most of each day. And then suddenly it matters a whole bunch.
Yeah, it's actually one of the best curses you can find, that one alongside Knight's Encroachment, because you can just drop the Knight's Encroachment for that final boss, or the Knight 2 boss, and then pick it back up at the end, or you can drop the Knight's Tide damage if you're about to die to the storm. So
yeah, if you have a curse on your weapon, which gives you rot or poison buildup below max hit points, that's also something I will frequently drop during the Knight boss fight if it comes to clutching and, I'm at 50% and have no more flasks. So if those are on your weapon passives, they again are not so bad.
So moving on to the next point I have for you guys. You are going to want to practice, especially the bosses you do not feel like you're good at. Prime example, I felt like I was horrible at Everdark Gladius. He would kick my booty every single time. He is a very hard boss. He does a lot of damage. And when I was in like depth 3 and 4, every time I ran into him, I was like, no, this run's over. So what did I do? Well, I'm on PC, and on PC you can use mods. The Boss Arena mod from Nexus Mods is a must, in my opinion, if you want to grind to depth 5 without taking a million years to do it. I got some mods from Nexus Mods, and I went and I practiced Everdark Gladius for like an hour. And all I did was just load in with a white greatsword as Wilder and just dodge. I just dodged all his attacks, just watched what he does, looked for the tells, looked for the telegraphs, and it worked. Now, every time I see Everdark Gladius, I'm like, okay, as long as my teammates stay alive, this is an easy clap. Like, we're definitely going to win. Now, if you're on console, practicing can be a little bit harder because you don't have mods at your disposal. In that case, if you don't want to buy a PC, you can just run expeditions that you're not great at, or run expeditions for bosses you feel like you need practice on, but do it solo in the base game because it's a lot more forgiving. You can take a hit or two and you'll be fine. Maybe play the Wilder so that you have the extra life, so to speak, in his passive. And just make it to the Night Boss and maybe don't even focus on winning. Like, just stand there and dodge him for a while and try to figure out what he's doing, and then you'll see huge improvements if you do that.
I'm not sure that's possible in the new DLC bosses because their night bosses are not friendly for solo players. So what I've been doing instead is queuing with randoms. Even the 2 demons on the balancers, they don't back off. So they're just kind of both hitting you at once. And all these night bosses kind of feel cruel to solo players. Have you experienced this? Do you have any advice for that?
I have. I do have experience for that. I actually died to the demon pair in the base game.
Yeah.
Because they for whatever reason, don't have the same type of AI tuning where one of them will attack you at once, and they do a ton of AoE effects, like the poison AoEs, and that can be really rough. I've actually been doing a ton of solo depth 5 lately just to challenge myself, and I've been playing a lot of Guardian, which is like one of the hardest characters to play solo, but I absolutely love the challenge, and I don't even do the Balancer Expedition anymore because if I see the demon pair, it's just I don't think there's any way to do it, or at least I haven't figured it out. So yes, I do think a lot of the gank fights in the new DLC expeditions can be tough, but I do think it's doable. I do believe I have beaten the demon pair solo in the base game. It's hard though.
Rather than soloing, I have been playing with randoms on the base versions to try to get some more experience with that. I will say though, I don't enjoy it. I prefer to fight in Deep in Night. So instead, what I will do, since I'm on console and I can't do arena mode, I will watch more videos and study these videos. So yeah, I'll study videos of people fighting these bosses specifically. I even gone back and found some old videos of people fighting Moog. hit lists and the Death Knights to get some more sense of how to approach those bosses rather than trying to do it solo.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next point, is watch guide videos. I'm sure many of you know, but if you don't, there's a great YouTuber named Chris Crass who does some really good guide videos on all the bosses. And those have helped me out a ton in just learning some of the technical details of some of the attacks. If you're struggling with a particular boss or multiple bosses, just go watch those guide videos. They're very easy to find.
Chris Crass, spelled Crass, Chrass.
Watch them a couple times and you'll see improvements. The other thing that I do is I like to watch streamers and YouTubers. Yui is one of my favorites. He's actually the one I watch the most. And I actually got to play on one of his streams once, which was super fun. I had a blast doing that. Even just watching your favorite streamer or YouTuber fight these bosses, you can see them do things that you would have never thought of. Like, for example, during either Gladius fight, when the dogs split into 3, I never thought to unlock the camera and have my character look at me, like face the other way, not face the boss, and just walk slowly away from the dogs while panning your camera to keep all the dogs in your view until you can do enough damage to have them transform into one, or the timer runs out if it's later in the fight. Because that is the most effective way to fight the dogs when they're split up. Because every time I've died or many of the times I would die to the dogs is when one of them hits me and I can't see them. So every single time I do that boss fight, if they're aggroed on me or if I'm playing solo, that's what I do. And I learned that from watching Yui because he did that. And I was like, wow, that's really smart. I never would have thought to do that. And that's actually another great tip in general, is just learn to unlock your camera. Because when I first started playing Elden Ring and this game, I would never really unlock my camera for fights. But now I do it all the time, and it's very, very useful for certain situations.
Can you describe another situation where that's useful?
Another one where it's useful is a couple more, actually. If you're fighting the deer or the donkey, whatever it is, the
elk,
the
ancestral spirit.
The ancestral spirit. Yeah, he's really good to unlock your camera for because he kind of has a weird lock-on spot that can make it a little hard to hit him, so that's a good one to unlock for. Another one is Ancient Dragon. That's a good one to unlock for because when you lock onto his leg, you kind of like look up at him, and it's just kind of awkward. So that's another. He actually killed me playing solo Guardian today because I couldn't quite figure out how to unlock but also block effectively.
Yeah, Guardian's hard because you get dead angled so often. It is really hard to survive with your shield in this game.
Yeah, and then the last thing to go with that, a general rule I found to be true is if you can't beat an enemy somewhat easily in the base game playing solo, you will probably be a liability in Deep of Night. And a great example of this is Artorias. I did not practice Artorias enough before I took him on in Deep of Night, and I was a bit of a liability when we fought him because I did not know the moveset very well. So what did I do? I loaded up the boss arena mod. I practiced him for like 20, 30 minutes, and now every time I fought Artorias, it hasn't been too difficult, although he did kill us once the other day.
I'm sure you had nothing to do with that failure. So again, on console, I can't really practice in the arena mode, and I can't really solo to Artorias consistently. So what I would do is watch more videos or maybe play the base game with randoms.
Yeah, I really like the idea of playing the base game with randoms. That's totally fine. And you might even end up involuntarily soloing the boss because I hear that random teammates in the base game can sometimes not be the greatest. It's a great way to practice. And it doesn't matter if you lose. If you lose, who cares? And you're here, it's a video game. You're here to have fun. So I would have just as much fun playing the base game if I had a goal. My goal is to practice this boss and get better at it.
I would also recommend soloing your way through Depth 2 because the teammates you'll find in Depth 2 are a lot of levers and very unreliable, and it's probably easier to solo your way through that, and that will be some of the good practice. And then if you're up against the Balancers or Dreglord, whose night bosses are not really meant to be soloed, you can just exit out of that game, and if you're solo, there's no penalty to doing that.
Okay, moving on to the next section, enhancing your game knowledge. Enhancing your game knowledge is incredibly important for Deep of Night because every little decision matters, every little advantage matters, and all those small decisions and optimizations really add up when it comes to your success rate. First example I have here is knowing not only the resistances of the Night Lord, because I mean they're listed there on the fight, so you probably know what they are already. And if you don't, you probably shouldn't be playing Deep of Night yet. But the night bosses also have weaknesses and resistances, of course, but they'll often be the opposite of what the Night Lord is. So if you're fighting Sentient Pest, you might get the Magma Worm, and the Magma Worm is resistant to fire. So you might not want to use your fire weapon. You might want to try to find another weapon that is good versus that enemy to get through that fight effectively.
Yeah, the Magma Worm is a Night 2 boss, but even Night 1 boss, we've lost sometimes because people are gung-ho about finding fire weapons against Caligo or Sentient Pest, and then who shows up but Smelter Demon, who is again mostly immune to fire, and you just feel like you're doing no damage, and the fight drags on. The game often does this, so it is important to try to be aware of this. One rule of thumb that I keep in mind is that if you're fighting the latter 3 bosses, Night Lords, so that's Fissure in the Fog, Dark Drift Knight, and Equilibrious Beast, all of those could have a wholly vulnerable Night 2 boss, such as the Deathrite Bird. So you want to have a wholly damage or at least strike damage against the Night 2 boss if you're fighting Equilibrious Beast, Dark Drift Knight, or Fissure in the Fog. And again, these fire vulnerable bosses, you want a non-fire weapon to deal with the Night 1 boss or Night 2 boss sometimes.
Tibia Mariner is a really good example. Tibia Mariner can be very tough if you do not find a holy weapon or find a shared order or sacred order on your weapon skill. Valiant Gargoyle is resistant to all status effects, so you might not want to have poison or frost for that. Smelter Demon's resistant to fire. Death Knights are weak to holy.
Yeah, for the undead, you often want Strike or Holy, and the Tibia Mirror can happen on Sentient Pest, on Equilibrious Beast, or on Fissure in the Fog.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to die to any Night 1 boss, it's probably Tibia Mariner, the Demon Pair. Freya used to be one of the bosses that I would die to because she can be super tough in depth 4 and 5, but a really great tip for that one is just kill all the spiders over and over again to recharge your ult. That's all anyone does in that fight in depth 5, and it works perfectly.
Part of that is that you want to have a relic which gives you ultimate recharge on killing enemy deaths. And let's see, that also, and another Night 1 boss which can really derail some runs is the Valiant Gargoyle. And again, it's if you don't have strike or magic damage to fight this, you feel like you're just doing no damage and you just get worn down and get one shot eventually. And Valiant Gargoyle can appear on Gaping Jaw or Augur.
And Healster as well.
Anything can appeal. Yeah, anything can happen on Healster.
Yeah, Valiant Gargoyle can be pretty tough if you don't have a caster strike damage. But the Guardian's very good versus him too.
And then, of course, on the Balancers and the Dreglord, the Night 1 bosses are exceptionally difficult. Like the Balancers, you can fight the Holy Warrior / Curse Blade duo, try to burst down the Curse Blade. You can try to kite the warrior, or better yet, put him to sleep. The other ones are the demons. That's just don't bring fire to that fight. In the Dreglord, the Night 1 bosses can be the bears, especially that duo of rune bears. You can put them to sleep. They are vulnerable against that. The bear has such huge air effects which can hit you behind him. You really do need to learn those ahead of time. You can jump over the fissures. The big bear does. And then the Death Knights are vulnerable to Holy, of course. I found that it's better to try to double and triple team them or burst them down with ultimates rather than fight them all one-on-one. Do you have any more tips for the Death Knights, Grand?
The Death Knights, yeah. So killing the first one's really easy. If you're in a trio, you can just gang up on him. Another really good strategy for the Death Knights is learn how to backstab them. They have a lot of attacks that are very punishable with backstabs if you just dodge into it. That's going to be very useful for you. The Duchess ult is very good versus the Death Knights. Usually if I'm playing Duchess, I will kill the first one and then I'll ult immediately after the next 3 spawn in, and usually we can kill at least one of them, and then it's not super bad because then 2 people can take care of one and the other person can just kind of distract the other one. So I would say relying on your ults, having your ults ready for that is very good, and then learn the backstab or how to punish them with backstabs.
They can be frostbit. That's probably the other main one that would be useful.
So talking about some Night 2 bosses that you want to be prepared for, the top of my list is the Dancer. Her moves are very difficult, or she doesn't telegraph her moves very well. They come out very quickly. She can be very difficult. She is weak to holy though, so if you can find a holy weapon to bring to that would be very good, and she will appear for the Fissure in the Fog.
She's one of those holy vulnerable bosses, which can happen in Dark Drift Knight, Fissure in the Fog, or Equilibrious Beast. Those are somewhat easy to remember. They're the final 3 Night Lords in the base game, or excluding the Night Lord Healstar himself. You just always want holy on Night 2, otherwise you could get killed by one of these exceptionally hard Night 2 bosses, such as the Dancer.
Yeah, the other one for me that can be pretty tough sometimes is a Nameless King. He does a lot of damage. He attacks quickly. Some of his moves are kind of hard to dodge, like when he jumps up in the air and kind of flies down. It can be a little difficult to time that one. So bring some holy damage for that as well. Knight Artorias, of course, is very, very difficult.
Yeah, let me hold you on Nameless King. So his mount, the chicken, wyvern, I guess you could say, is vulnerable to lightning. So if you have lightning damage, which you probably will because this is a Fulgur boss, then you will want to burst down the wyvern with lightning. But lightning is the opposite of what you want for the Nameless King himself. Will want holy there.
Knight Artorias can be pretty difficult for a lot of players, including me. He is vulnerable to holy, lightning, and strike damage.
For Knight Artorias, unfortunately, it's not as simple as simply finding holy damage because he's not very vulnerable to that compared to other affinities. Instead, you really do need to know his moveset. One simple tip is that most of his punishable moves are ones from range, so you want to continuously be backing away from him to elicit these long-range moves.
Another one that I find difficult sometimes is DTS, or Draconic Tree Sentinel. He doesn't really have any vulnerabilities, but he is resistant, especially to slash, fire, and lightning damage. So I would recommend not using those on him. Obviously, there's Moog, can be very difficult. Moog is resistant to fire, but he can be bled pretty easily. Does he have any other?
He's fairly resistant to all affinities as well, but especially fire. You will want to, if you're fighting the balancers, look for Libra and try to get either the Physic, which keeps you purify your blood, or bleed resistance against him. Again, you will have prepared by not having taking damage causes madness buildup or other status buildup on your build. Otherwise, just the blood stuff he sprays around I don't know if it's possible to beat him with that. He just sprays blood, flame everywhere, and it does tick damage, can rapidly build up your madness gauges, for instance. Yeah, bleed and just physical damage is what he's more vulnerable to.
So moving on from that, kind of back to watching videos. Not only can you watch videos for the different boss fights, but you can also watch guide videos for routing, characters you like to play. There's a great video from Chris Krass on the field bosses, which I found very helpful, and then just like any general tips. There's lots of great content out there. I know playing the game is really fun, but if you strive to reach those higher depths, you definitely want to spend some time enhancing your game knowledge, and videos are great for that, not just for the bosses, but for just any information that you can gather to increase your success rate. And then the last thing I have for that is, if you're always leading your team every time you get into a match, maybe try following for once and you might learn something. So that's something I've done as well.
People are really struggling with a new map, especially the Great Hollows. Can we say a few general tips about that? For instance, I would probably avoid the Divine Towers, or the temples as they're called. They can be slow on Deep of Night, and there's a lot of risk associated with them, and not completing the boss before you have to run away. The castles are more lucrative. Let's see, what other tips do you have for the Great Hollows?
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually, when I first started playing the map, I always thought that doing the Divine Towers was the best thing to do. Because actually, this is what I just said before about following. This is what I do on the new map, because I don't really feel super great on the new map still. So I always just take a follower role whenever we get the new map, and I let my teammates lead, and they always take me through the castles and kill all the bosses in there, and that works exceptionally well. Sticking with your team is especially important on the new map, especially if you don't know it very well, because if you stray from your team even a little bit, it's very, very easy to get lost, especially if you're running around the castle. If you die and lose your runes somewhere, it can be hard to recover them, as you've talked about in prior episodes. So I think sticking with your team is particularly important. Try to get as many crystals as you can on day one as well, because you definitely want to get that crystal power every single time you get into this map. So keep your eye out for them, pan your camera around, take a little extra time. And this is another situation where maybe splitting off from your team is okay, as if you want to go run and do a crystal real quick, go do that. And then try to know where the spawns are. I still haven't figured it out quite yet, but my spatial intelligence isn't very high, so I give myself a little bit of grace there.
One Depth 4 game I played was one of the players I felt like was sabotaging the game, just left the party behind entirely, then just chased crystals across the map, and then we just died horribly over and over again without the third person. Now, we could have adapted to that by going to fight some easier monsters, try to not take on something as challenging, but that's the sort of thing where it's a little bit hard to coordinate that in a random team, and that's a strategy where one person just hunts for crystals, the other two do something simple, something more applicable to a set team where you're communicating ahead of time.
I think that's pretty much all I got for that right now.
Oh, it's very tough. It is very tough. It leads to it really exacerbates any knowledge deficits among the team. And the new night bosses, the new map, make things very tough. The new places of interest on the old map, Limfeld, make night invaders more complex often. For instance, the swamps, the status swamps. The night invaders will sometimes be deep in the swamp, and you have to go past all these monsters, meaning you can't kill them very easily. Or sometimes you'll go very down deep, and then the night invader will spawn not in the depths of that status swamp, but on the top level, and then you'll never find the invader. So they've done a lot to decrease the potency of Everjails and night invaders to a lesser extent with these new additions. Just be aware that the Night Invader strategy still is good, but it is more difficult, and I would not venture into a status swamp low level. I would wait until level 7 probably, or maybe 6 if you're feeling badass, or 5. Not 5. Be aware of the status swamps. But again, sometimes the Night Invaders are just on the top level, but not always. It's a risk going there.
Yeah, I generally avoid the status swamps in Deep of Night, because if you die down there, it is just a huge time loss trying to go back and get your souls. You might even just opt to leave them behind. That's actually what makes the Balancer raid particularly potent in Deep of Night, especially in solo. Oh my goodness, the Balancer raid is really tough when they come in and you're like when you're level 3 and then they're down in the bottom of a status swamp and you have to fight an enemy that's scaled for 3 players by yourself at level 3. It is rough.
It's especially the Balancer raid, especially bad because their aura, which they place on creatures, will hide whether or not they're variants. And so often I'll be at the bottom of a status swamp. The ice one is what comes to mind, and there's going to be an ice lobster. And not only is that tough to begin with, but it will be a variant boss and just one-shot you constantly. And that's when you need to call your teammates or get some help. It can be tough. It can be tough.
I'm usually one to channel my hubris into that fight and just go try and do it myself. And usually I can be successful depending on the character I'm playing. But I think it's generally better to try and fight the boss by yourself until usually at least one of you is going to succeed at killing your boss by yourself. So then that person can immediately go help the next person if they're struggling. The Balancer raid is tough all around, but it hasn't been too detrimental in my Deep of Night runs recently.
Plus, the reward is so good, at least.
Yeah, next thing, this is a short one, but it's very important. Have several characters ready to rock and roll for each expedition, because you might like to play Iron Eye. He is the best character, but having 2 Iron Eyes on the team is really not very good. So if you have somebody else who really, really wants to play Iron Eye, practice some empathy, let them play Iron Eye, and you have another class ready to go, Duchess, Wilder, what have you. And you know what? I find it incredibly fun to switch my classes constantly, have several characters ready to go so that you're not potentially hurting the team by running 2 Iron Eyes or 2 Duchesses. Well, 2 Duchesses might not be so bad if you're running skills or maybe even magic, but her skill doesn't stack. 2 Guardians usually isn't very good either. I have had a run where that happened and it did not go very well. Have multiple characters ready to go. And you might even have different builds for each boss as well, like I do. Spend some time getting that ready, practicing with those characters, learning how to play them, having builds ready for them.
Yeah, strategically, I would want a build ready for every Night Lord specifically. If no, for instance, if no one is playing an Iron Eye, that's a good time to audible into Iron Eye. If you want to win, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Just make sure you have an Iron Eye on your team, and then if you're if you are always sure that you have an Iron Eye on your team, then again, the damage relics, which increase the damage if someone is poisoned, is a pretty reasonable option.
Yeah, if you're going to play Iron Eye, the poison route is the best way. And I would argue even having poison on your Heelster expedition is good, because that's going to help you get through all the bosses up to him, and then you can just find a holy bow along the way, or maybe your starting bow as holy, or you find a holy weapon if you're playing melee Iron Eye. Yes, Iron Eye is a very strong character. Having one on the team is, if you're playing the meta, is a must. In my experience, I strongly dislike playing Iron Eye. I think he's kind of boring and very easy to play. I have lots of expeditions where there is no Iron Eye, and it can work. But yes, the meta is having an Iron Eye. So if you want to have an Iron Eye class ready to go, that's good. And the last thing I have here is accountability and your mindset. If you lose in Deep of Night, it can be very painful. The losses feel a lot worse than the wins in my experience, because you just lose so many points. And this gets even more true the higher depths you go. Like in depth 5, if you lose on night 1, you're losing 800 points, which is 4 games worth of progress, and it really, really stinks. If you lose, try to focus on what you learned. Try to think about what you can do better, rather than focusing on your teammates' mistakes. I've been on both sides of this coin. I have definitely had some games where my teammates were just not pulling their weight, and it was really tough. Everdark Augur is a great example, because there's lots of people out there who don't know how to play Everdark Augur, and that's one of those fights that you really just can't survive if your teammates aren't pulling their weight. Try to focus on what you could have done better along the way, rather than focusing on your teammates' mistakes, and that will help you a lot in your success rate. A great example of a lesson I learned recently is, this actually happened to me twice, I believe 2 runs in a row. We went to the castle at the end of night 1, and we were fighting all the enemies. The castle was on the right on the edge of the circle, and one of my teammates went down and was 3-barred as the storm was closing in. And rather than run away like I should have done, I tried to revive him, and I believe I was successful, but then I think all of us died right before we were able to escape the storm, and now we're fighting the night 1 boss at level 4, which is a very rough time, and we did die on night 1, which lost us 800 points, which really stinks. So right then and there I learned, okay, if it's getting to be the end of the night, which another thing you should learn is kind of judging when the night's going to end. So if it's getting to be towards the end of the night, what I typically do, and I didn't do in this case, is I'll ping somewhere else on the map closer towards the center of the circle, whether that be a field boss or another point of interest maybe we want to get to. And I say, hey, guys, let's go here. Night's kind of ending. We don't really want to be stuck in the castle with all these enemies and with the circle closing. So let's go that way. And usually people oblige.
In that example, you could have blamed your teammate and not learned anything from it. The problem with there is my horrible teammate who died, and then you overlooked the part where then you stayed to try to revive them, which was your mistake. It's often it can be outside your control whether or not you win any particular game, but it is within your control to learn from your mistakes. It's within your control to have a healthy mindset toward the game and find ways to enjoy it, even in these difficult challenge modes. As I said, I enjoy Deep of Night because I just think it's a better designed game. It's got more complexity with your relics, more variety with what you can find in game. I enjoy it, and there's a lot to enjoy about fighting at these deeper depths if you want a greater challenge, if it's too easy for you otherwise, or if you want to play with other players, which are on average, at least in depth 5, again, better players, not always, but they are often better. So there's a lot of things that you can find enjoyment in even these later Deep of Nights, and you do want to make sure you are enjoying yourself during this process. Otherwise, it's definitely not worth it. If you reach max rank, you get a tiny color difference to one of your banners. It's almost unnoticeable. You get the screenshot, though. You get the screenshot that you've reached it. But I do appreciate how FromSoft has not given you any material, like you don't get a special relic or anything from reaching max rank, but you can enjoy yourself during the process quite a bit.
Wait, so you said you appreciate that they don't give you anything?
I think that they don't want to incentivize people to fixate on that goal, which is going to be unattainable and frustrating goal for the majority of players. Like I think the metric is 3% of people play in depth 5, and among those people in depth 5, probably much less than 3% are actually going to be able to achieve the max rank. So no, I think it's healthier that there's not a benefit, more material benefit for reaching the max rank.
I don't know. I feel like my relationship to this game may not be the healthiest. But
well, you can review, and this is something I need to do too, is review our mental strength episode. I have, as I mentioned at the beginning, I really sometimes get frustrated by bad randoms or people I perceive as playing badly, and then I play badly, and then I get frustrated. It is important to have a healthy mindset with this game.
I just really love the game, so I play it a lot, and I don't really spend a whole lot of time playing other games, which I probably should. Although I did play Lies of P for about an hour a couple of days ago, which was really enjoyable, so I should really do that more. But I love the gameplay loop. I don't really struggle too much with being frustrated with people or even with my own mistakes, because I understand people make mistakes. Maybe they had a bad game, maybe I had a bad game, but I definitely like playing the game a lot, and I do play it a lot. You know, you're not going to progress if you don't put forth the extra effort. If you really love this game and you want to get to that top level, you're going to have to put in some extra effort. Just playing the game isn't going to be enough per se. You're going to have to watch some videos. You're going to have to do some practicing, especially if you feel like you're quote unquote hard stuck in depth 3. You may want to put in a little bit of extra work on the outside. The definition of insanity, as many of you know, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And then take a break if you're frustrated, or if you feel like you're playing too much, like me, I should probably take a break and play some other games. And then lastly, just remember that it's a video game. You're supposed to be having fun. So if you're not having fun, maybe reassess if this is the game for you, or if you want to maybe just take a break for a while. I've actually done that myself. I've uninstalled the game a couple of times.
This is the only game I play, and I don't know if playing another game is something I need to do in terms of taking a break, but if I do take a break to review videos, to see if I just died to Moog, I won't just be frustrated and continue and hope things improve without putting in any work. I will study these videos. I maybe will take a break, go outside, do something else. But no, I don't see the need
touch
to play
grass,
other
as
games.
they say.
Yeah, go touch grass. All that is a healthy behavior. I don't see the need to play other games though.
Yeah, and that's just more for me. I have a lot of other games. I have friends that want to play with me that, maybe I don't play with them as often as I should.
All right. Well, this week our community recommendation is Grand's channel on Metal, and you can find that link in the show notes or GamesByGrand. Let's see if you found this episode useful, review it, comment, recommend it to a friend. This week we have a Spotify comment by,
I believe it's Tsukiyomi. I think the T is silent.
Thank you. We'll go with that. Quote, "First off, I'm really enjoying your podcast. I have a question regarding the dormant power HP restoration upon successive attacks, +3. Does that mean each successive attack restores 3 hit points or 3% hit points? I think you mentioned it on one of the episodes, but I can't remember right now." End quote. I looked on my sheets, useful info. It did say it was just 3 hit points, which to me seems horribly bad. Compared to 10 power is at least substantial on successive attacks. But either way, this is one where I would not prioritize it, and it might be a detriment if you rely on successive attacks, because again, the more successive attack triggers you have, the less frequently they will trigger. So this is one where you probably are safe avoiding it. The successive attacks give you power back, seems a little bit better to me in terms of the gameplay. If I'm playing a skill build, I'm going to be attacking infrequently with just a few times with my skill, unless it's Rivers of Blood. And if I'm attacking more regularly, it's because I'm probably out of power and I want to restore that power with the successive attacks.
I really don't think it's 3 HP because I'm seeing X weapon restores HP. Like if I attack with a greatsword, it restores HP on a relic effect. It looks like it restores 10 HP with each attack. Maybe it is 3%.
3 sounds incredibly low, but I don't know that it's 3%. Even if it's 3%, I think I would not prioritize it. And in fact, I've sometimes just picked nothing over this. It's the benefit here is low compared to triggering your successive attacks more regularly. So if you want us to read your Spotify comment or 5-star review, create one of those things. You can find us on social media at Nightreign Podcast. For Grand and Evan, I will say farewell. Together we'll make certain the dawn will come.